As the first light broke over the river, Ikenna's net remained empty. He sighed, pulling it from the water, feeling the weight of another sleepless night with no cash. Just as he was about to pack up, a faint splash echoed across the river bank. He froze, listening. "Help, please!" The soft cry floated on the water, fragile like a whisper. Ikenna turned, his heart pounding, searching the mist. There, drifting near the reeds, was a woman. Her arms barely moved, her body as pale as the dawn sky. He dropped his net, leaping into the water, swimming towards her as fast as he could. Her lips were turning blue, her eyes half closed, but she was alive. With trembling hands, he lifted her from the river and carried her to the bank. But as he looked at her, the fear returned, creeping up his spine. The woman, she looked familiar, yet he had never seen her before. Her face, so still and haunting, seemed to belong to another world. He wanted to turn away, to run, but something held him there, rooted to the ground. Then her eyes snapped open. Ikenna stared as the woman's eyes met his. They were dark and deep, like the river at midnight, holding a sadness he couldn't understand. She blinked, water dripping from her lashes, and slowly her lips parted. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered, her voice soft like the river breeze. I swallowed hard, still holding her. "Who are you, and why were you in the water?" The woman shivered in his arms. "My name is Adaora," she replied. "I have no family, no home. The river, it has been my only companion for so long." Her words sent a chill down his spine, but he shook it off. "Come," he said gently. "You need warmth and food." As he helped her stand, Adora's legs wobbled. She leaned on him, clutching his shoulder, and together they walked back to his small hut by the river bank. Inside, Ikenna lit a fire and offered her a blanket. She sat by the fire, her gaze fixed on the flames, her fingers trembling. After a while, he handed her a bowl of steaming fish broth. Adaora sipped slowly, looking around his simple hut with curiosity. "You live here alone?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yes," Ikenna replied, sitting across from her. "My parents, they passed long ago. Since then, it's just been me and the river." Adaora nodded, her eyes drifting back to the flames. "The river, it can be a strange place," she murmured. "It can hold secrets, and sometimes it calls people." Ikenna frowned. "Calls people? What do you mean?" She looked at him, her gaze intense. "Some who enter the river never return. The water keeps them." A shiver ran through Ikenna. "But I pulled you out. You're safe now." A faint smile crossed Adora's lips, sad and knowing. "Perhaps I am safe now." Days passed, and Adaora remained with Ikenna. She was quiet, moving through the hut like a shadow, watching him with dark eyes that seemed to hold untold stories. At night, as Ikenna lay on his mat, he could hear her softly humming a melody so haunting it seemed to echo from the river itself. One night, unable to sleep, he asked her, "Adaora, where did you come from? Where were you in the river that day?" Adaora paused, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "I was born by the river," she said slowly. "My family, they were all fishermen like you, but something happened, something dark. One night, the river claimed them." Her words sent chills down his spine. "The river claimed them?" She nodded, a shadow crossing her face. "They drowned, every one of them, and I was the only one left." Ikenna reached out, touching her hand gently. "I'm sorry, Adaora, that's a heavy burden to carry." She looked at him, her gaze intense. "But the river never forgets, Ikenna. It calls to me even now." "Then live with me," he said, his voice filled with sudden urgency. "We can go far from here. I'll take care of you, Adaora." She placed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "The river does not let go so easily. I am bound to it, and now you may be too." At that moment, a loud splash came from outside. Ikenna froze, his heart pounding as he turned towards the sound. "Adaora," he whispered, glancing at her. "What was that?" She stared at the door, her expression unreadable. Sometimes the river comes to claim what it lost. Ikenna's heart raced as he stared at the door outside. The night was still, with only the soft sound of the river lapping against the shore. But that splash, it sounded like something large, like a person falling into the water. Adaora placed her hand on his shoulder, "Stay here, Ikenna," she whispered, her voice calm, but her eyes filled with sadness. "Sometimes it is best not to answer the river's call." Ikenna shook his head. "No, I can't. No, I can't ignore it. If someone's out there, I need to help them just like I helped you." Before Adaora could stop him, he grabbed a lantern and stepped outside into the chilly night. The air was thick and heavy, the mist swirling around him as he made his way to the riverbank. He held the lantern high, squinting into the darkness, but saw nothing except the dark water moving lazily under the moonlight. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard it again, a faint voice drifting over the water. "Ikenna! Ikenna!" He froze. It was his mother's voice. Ikenna's hands trembled, gripping the lantern tightly. His mother had died years ago, yet her voice was so unmistakable, calling to him from the depths of the river. Slowly, he took a step forward, drawn by the voice, unable to resist its pull. "Ikenna, come closer." The voice was soft, comforting, like she used to sound when she sang him to sleep as a child. Without realizing it, he took another step, his feet sinking into the wet sand at the edge of the river. Just then, a cold hand grasped his arm, pulling him back. He turned and saw Adaora, her eyes wide with fear. "No, Ikenna," she whispered, her voice urgent. "That is not your mother. It is the river calling to you, trying to pull you in." Ikenna blinked, the trance breaking, and he stumbled back from the water's edge. He looked down at Adaora, his chest heavy. Why? Why is it calling me? What does it want?" Adora's gaze softened, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. The river is bound to those it has lost, and sometimes it seeks to take others to keep them company. It remembers everyone who has crossed its paths. They returned to the hut, but Ikenna couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand the mystery surrounding Adaora and the river. Who was she really? Why did he feel that the river had tied their fates together? As days turned into weeks, Ikenna and Adaora grew closer. She helped him with his fishing, her laughter filling the air as they walked side by side. Yet there was always a shadow that lingered, a feeling that Adaora was holding something back. One evening, as he sat by the riverbank watching the sunset, he turned to her. "Adaora, why did the river spare you that day?" Adaora looked down, tracing patterns in the sand with her fingers. "Ikenna, there's something you don't know about me. Something I've hidden because I feared you wouldn't understand." He took her hand gently. "Tell me, I want to understand." She looked up at him, her dark eyes filled with sorrow. "The river did not spare me, Ikenna. It claimed me a long time ago. The day my family drowned, I drowned with them. But the river kept me. It gave me life, but only halfway." Ikenna's heart pounded. "You mean you're not?" She nodded her head. Adora's hand slipped from his, her gaze turning distant, as if looking back into a past too painful to bear. The warmth in her eyes seemed to fade, replaced by a chill that seeped into the air around them. "Ikenna," she began softly, her voice almost a whisper. "The river took me. I remember sinking, the weight of the water pressing down on me. Taking my last breath, I was gone. But somehow I woke up alone in the depths. The river, it didn't let me die. Instead, it changed me." Ikenna's mind spun. "Changed you? What does that mean?" She looked away, her fingers trembling. "I don't belong in this world, Ikenna. I'm part of the river now. It lets me walk on land, but only because I serve it. I am bound to it, trapped in a life that's neither here nor there. That's why I was in the water that day. Each time it calls, I must go, even if it takes me away forever." Ikenna's heart ached as he listened. He reached out, touching her shoulder gently. "But why did the river let me save you?" Adaora smiled faintly, her eyes still sad. "It didn't let you save me, Ikenna. It let me bring you to it." His heart skipped. "What are you saying?" Adora's eyes turned glassy, reflecting the dark river behind them. The river has claimed so many. Some were fishermen, some travelers who lost their way, some children who played too close to the shore, but it never forgets. It holds their soul, and over time, it grows lonely. Ikenna felt a chill creep over him, but he didn't move. "So, it's not done. It still wants more?" She nodded. "Yes. It let you save me because now I am meant to bring you to it. That was the pact." Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. Ikenna looked down, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had felt drawn to her from the beginning, But now he understood this pull wasn't his own. It was the river's hand, pulling him closer, binding him to a fate he hadn't chosen. "But I can't resist it," he said firmly, gripping her hand. "I don't have to go. I can choose to stay with you, Adaora." She looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's not that simple. I was meant to lead you back to the water. The river is patient, Ikenna. It will wait, it will hunt, and when you're weak, it will take you." Ikenna shivered, feeling the river's pull, even now, whispering softly in the distance, but his mind was made up. "No," he said, tightening his grip on her hand. "I won't let it have me. I won't let it have you either." She stared at him, surprised. "But the river, it is stronger than both of us." "Then we will find a way to break its hold," he said fiercely. "We will find a way to free you." Adaora shook her head slowly. "No one has ever escaped the river's grasp, Ikenna. Once it claims someone, it never lets go." But as she spoke, a spark of hope flickered in her eyes. A hope she had buried long ago. For the first time since they met, he saw something changed in her. The sorrow that had once weighed her down seemed to lift, even if only a little. "What if we could find a way?" he pressed. "What if there's a way to break the bond?" Adaora hesitated, glancing towards the dark water. There is one way," she whispered, "but it is dangerous to break the river's hold. We would have to confront it, enter its depths, and face the souls it holds captive." Ikenna felt a shiver pass through him. "You mean go to the heart of the river?" She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, to release me, you must go where no living soul has ever returned. The river guards its secret fiercely, and its spirit, they will not welcome you." The thought filled Ikenna with dread, but he saw the glimmer of hope in her eyes. For Adaora, he would risk everything. "Then I will go," he said, his voice steady. "I will go into the heart of the river and face whatever is there. I will do whatever it takes to free you." Adaora reached out her hand, resting on his cheek. "If you go, Ikenna, you may never return. The spirit will try to keep you, and they will make you see things you cannot resist." He met her gaze, his resolve unshaken. "If that's what it takes to break the curse, then I will face whatever waits in the river." A tear slipped down her cheek, but her lips curved into a smile, one that held a mixture of sadness, hope, and gratitude. "Then I will go with you. We will face the river together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they held each other close, knowing that the journey ahead would test their courage and perhaps their lives. As the dark clouds rolled across the sky, casting shadows over the river, Ikenna and Adaora stood at the river bank. The water was usually still, reflecting the dim light like a black mirror, and an unnatural silence filled the air. It felt as though the river itself was watching, waiting. Ikenna tightened his grip on Adora's hand. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice a whisper. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "Once we step in, there is no returning back. The river, it will try to keep us, Ikenna. You must resist anything it shows you." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I will. No matter what happens, we stay together." Together, they dived into the water. The cold stung his skin, sharp and biting, and each step seemed to pull them deeper, faster, as though the river itself was eager to take them. As the water rose to their chests, then their shoulders, Ikenna felt a force tugging him downward, pulling them into the depths. Then, with a final gulp of air, they sank below the surface. Beneath the water, there was no light, no warmth, only darkness, an eerie quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. Ikenna reached for Adora's hand, holding on tightly as they drifted deeper into the abyss. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, a strange glow appeared ahead of them, flickering like a distant fire. They moved toward the light, and slowly figures began to emerge in the shadows, pale, ghostly shapes, drifting in the water, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. As they got closer, Ikenna's chest tightened with horror. The spirit watched them with lifeless eyes, their mouths opening and closing in silent cries, as though they were trapped in eternal torment. "These are the souls the river has claimed," Adaora whispered, her voice trembling. "The ones who never escaped." A cold hand brushed against Ikenna's arm, and he turned, finding himself face to face with one of the spirits. The figure looked like a young boy, his eyes wide with sorrow, his mouth moving as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the boy's face shifted, morphing into someone familiar. Ikenna's heart skipped a beat as he recognized his father, his face worn and withered, his eyes filled with sadness. "Ikenna!" His father's voice echoed in his mind, faint but clear. "Why did you leave us?" Ikenna's pulse quickened. "Father, is it really you?" The spirit's face twisted with pain. "Ikenna, I waited for you. You left me here all alone." Ikenna reached out, wanting to comfort the spirit, but Adaora's hand tightened and around his, pulling him back. "No, Ikenna, this isn't real. The river is trying to break you." He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the sorrow in his father's eyes. But deep down, he knew Adaora was right. This wasn't his father. This was the river's doing, twisting memories to trap him. He clenched his teeth, turning away. "You won't deceive me," he whispered. "I won't give in." The spirit let out a wail, a sound that echoed through the water, chilling them to the core. More figures began to appear, surrounding them in a circle, their faces shifting and morphing, each one a reflection of someone from Ikenna's past. Friends, family, neighbors, all of them staring, their eyes accusing, their faces twisted with sorrow. Adaora's grip on his hand tightened. "We are close. The river is fighting us now, but we must keep going." As they pushed forward, the spirits reached out, their hands brushing against their arm, their faces filling with sorrow and rage. And then, as they moved past the last of the spirits, the water changed. A swelling current pulled them downward, faster and faster, until they were thrown into a vast open chamber at the river's heart. In the center of the chamber stood a massive shadowy figure, its form shifting like dark smoke, eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. This was the river spirit, ancient and powerful, washing them with an intensity that made Ikenna's blood run cold. The spirit's voice echoed through the water, deep and resonant.
"Why have you come, mortals? You have no place here."
Ikenna squared his shoulders, standing firm. "We have come to free Adaora. You have kept her bound to you long enough." The spirit let out a low rumbling laugh, the sound vibrating through the waters.
"Free her? She belongs to me. Her life was taken by my waters. Her soul is bound to me for eternity."
Adaora stepped forward, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "I did not choose this. You took me when I was just a child, when I had my own life ahead of me. You stole everything from me, and now I want it back." The spirit's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter.
"You dare defy me, child? I am the river, the keeper of souls. I am older than time itself. You are nothing but a lost whisper in my depths."
But Ikenna stepped forward, holding his ground. "No, she is more than that. She has a life, a spirit that belongs to her, not to you, and I won't let you keep her." The spirit seemed to consider them, its gaze shifting between Ikenna and Adaora. Then it spoke, its voice low and dangerous.
"If you wish to take her, then you must give something in return."
"What do you want?" Ikenna asked, raising himself. The spirit's eyes gleamed.
"A soul to replace hers. If you are willing to give yourself to me, mortal, then she will be free."
Adaora gasped, turning to Ikenna. "No, Ikenna, you can't." But he held up a hand, silencing her. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "If that's what it takes, then I will do it." Adaora clutched his arm, her eyes pleading. "Ikenna, don't. I can't let you sacrifice yourself for me." He turned to her, his voice gentle. "Adaora, you've been trapped here for too long. You deserve a chance to live, to be free. Let me do this for you." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she nodded, understanding the depth of his resolve. He turned back to the spirit, meeting its gaze. "Take me," he said firmly. "Let Adaora go." The spirit let out a triumphant laugh, the sound echoing through the chamber. It reached out, dark tendrils wrapping around Ikenna, pulling him closer. He felt the cold seep into his bones, his strength draining as the spirit began to claim him. But then, as the shadows enveloped him, a strange warmth filled the water. Adaora stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a fierce determination. "No!" she cried. "I won't let you take him. I won't let you take him. I won't let you take anyone else." With a sort of strength, she reached out, grabbing Ikenna's hand and pulling him back. Her voice rose, echoing through the water, filled with a power that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her. "I release myself from you," she declared, her voice steady and powerful. "You have no claim over me. You will not take me." The spirit recoiled, its form flickering as if struck. For the first time, Ikenna saw a hint of fear in his glowing eyes. Adaora's gaze hardened. "You took my family, my life, but I am done being your prisoner. I break the bond here and now." The spirit let out a furious wail, but its form began to dissolve, breaking apart like mist in the morning sun. Ikenna felt the cold grip around him, losing as the spirit's power faded, leaving only the quiet, still water. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Ikenna and Adaora floated in the darkness, the spirit that had once surrounded them, now fading into the shadows, released from the river's hold. Together they rose, their bodies growing lighter as they ascended towards the surface. When they broke through the water, gasping for air, the first light of dawn was breaking over the riverbank. They dragged themselves onto the shore, exhausted but alive, free at last. Adaora looked at Ikenna, her face soft with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me my life back." He smiled, reaching out to touch her cheek. "We are free now, Adaora, free to live together." And as the sun rose over the river, they stood side by side, their past left behind, ready to face the world together.